Hey guys, this is the review video for our third test in Masechet Bava Kama this year. I have you guys in about an hour, so I'm going to try to get through this video quickly as possible, so I apologize if I don't stop to make hilarious jokes. I'll try to explain things to the best of my ability. Here we go. Okay, the first unit that's on this Gemara, the first sugya, was the part about putting the kohl on somebody's heart. This is unit 4. You'll notice that these Hadron alach ketzad haregel means we will return to you ketzad haregel. Ketzad haregel is the name of the parak we were learning. This is the last Gemara in the parak. It begins last sugya. It begins ve'amar Rabba, and we're actually not going. We finished till the end when we broke up into groups. But in terms of the test, we're going to do down to here. Okay, we're going to read this inside in a second, but just if you recall, we were basically talking about one type of scenario, but how it plays out in two different halachot. We're talking about if you place the kohl on somebody's chest or somebody's possession. Now, this is a paradigm for the victim being able to escape. We call it a paradigm because it's one example that can have a lot of different other examples that are similar to it. So in this case, you have a situation where a kohl is placed on somebody's chest. Why do I keep doing that? Okay, you have a kohl is placed on somebody's chest, and they could have escaped. A kohl is placed on their clothing, and they could have brushed it off again. This is all a paradigm for what happens in a situation where the victim could escape either damages to their possessions or could escape being murdered, and they let it happen anyway. Therefore, in any other situation or other situations where damage could have happened, but you could have avoided it, or murder could have happened, you could have avoided it, this halacha in our case is going to serve as a paradigm for the other scenarios as well. Okay, so let's begin. So it starts off with just very simple halachot from Rava. Amar Rava, hiniach lo gachel al libo v'ameit patur, al bidov v'nisrav chayav. So you have two scenarios. If you placed a kohl on someone's chest and they die, patur, the murderer is patur, because the person could have easily brushed it off and escaped. Al bigdov v'nisraf, let they put it on their clothing, like a pile of clothing they have, v'nisraf, and the clothing burns, chayav, and you have to pay for the damages. So what we have here is a paradigm. The paradigms being situations where victims could have escaped. And what happens when in regards to murder? So the person who put them in a situation where they died is not considered to be the murderer. They don't get the death penalty. But when it comes to damages, they actually do have to pay. And as we pointed out, the difference here has to do with the murder and damages are two different areas of halacha. When it comes to murder, it's all about the cause, right? Who is the cause of death here? And if you are the one who lets yourself die, then you are considered to be the cause. You are the main cause of why you died, not the person who put you there, because you easily could have escaped. Right, this is all assuming you could have escaped or it was easy to escape, etc., etc. What happens, but in regards to damages, as we know already, it's all about did you do an act of damage or not. So at the end of the day, even if the victim was the one who let their stuff burn, they were the cause, it doesn't matter, you're the one who did the act of damage. And since you were the one who did the actual act that caused the damage to happen, whether or not it could have been avoided or not by the victim is irrelevant because you are the one who did the act of damage, therefore you are chayav to pay. Now, after telling us these two halachot, Rava, who was Rabba's student, tells us the following. Amar Rava tarvayu taninhi. Tarvayu means both of these. Taninhi can be found in Mishnayot. Rava is telling us there are Mishnayot to prove both of these. What are both of these? Case number 1, that you're patur, and case number 2, that you're chayav. As we also pointed out, we're going to have nicknames for these cases to make it easier to reference them. The first case is going to be known as al libo, that's the murder case. The second case is going to be known as al bigdo, which is the damages case. So again, Rava says, my teacher Rava has two halachot, and he says the psak is patur and one a chayav in the other. There are mishnayot that prove that he's correct in both. And then Rava goes on to explain, to list both of these mishnayot and explain how it proves that they are correct. I should actually take that back. He doesn't explain how they prove they're correct. He just quotes the Mishnah, and it's up to us to figure that out. So just looking at the highlights here, so the Ali Bo de Tanan is the intro to the first Mishnah. So the Ali Bo case, meaning where Rava says, Hiniach lo gachar Ali Bo v'ameit patur, that can be proven de Tanan, as it says in Mishnah, and then in purple up here is the first Mishnah that he quotes as proof. Then Big Do de Tanan. How do we know that he's right about Big Do? That if you put it on Al Big Do v'nisraf, you're chayav. That if you put a kohl in someone's clothing, the victim could have got out of the damage, but they avoided, that you're chayav to pay. That he's correct. De Tanan, there's another Mishnah, and here's the Mishnah that proves him to be correct there. Let's look at these two Mishnayot independently quickly. First, again, the first Mishnah was Kavash Allah v'tocha or l'tocha mayim ve'inu yachol b'ameit chayav. If you trap somebody in fire or water, they can't escape, and the victim dies, you're chayav for murder. Obviously, they couldn't have escaped. You basically caused them to die. However, but if you pushed a person into fire or body of water and they could have escaped and they die, you're patur for murder. As we pointed out, the proof comes from this part of the Mishnah. This part of the Mishnah, again, this is the Seifa, it's the second part. You need to know this on the test. There's the Seifa is the first part, and the Reisha is the second part. Even though the Gemara is going to quote both parts of this Mishnah, it's the Seifa which proves to us that Rabba is correct, because it says here, if you had the ability to escape and you die, you're patur. The person who pushes you there is patur for murder, again, because you could have escaped. Then here's the Mishnah that proves that he's right about damages. Let's read this Mishnah together. If somebody says, rip my clothing or break my jar, and you listen, and you do so, right, you are chayav to pay. So again, the victim is permitting you to damage their stuff. Again, it's the same thing. There's a coal on their. You put a coal on their clothing, and they just allow it to burn. Right. So they're letting you damage. Yet you are, and Rabbah says you're chayav to pay, even though they let you. So to here, so you said, if someone says, "Rip my clothing, break my jar," and you listen, you're chayav to pay. That's the reisha of the Mishnah, and in this case, the proof comes from the reisha. Then the Mishnah goes on to elaborate, but if there is an understanding that you will be patur, then of course you're patur. If the guy says, rip my clothing, break my jar, and you won't have to pay, then you are patur. This is the Seifa. It adds a little bit of another dimension to the first halacha, and even though the Gemara quotes the whole Mishnah, it's only this first part, it's only the Reisha that Rabbah is proven to be correct from. Again, we have a situation here where the victim lets their stuff get damaged, and yet you still have to pay as the person who did the act of damage. So now let's read this part together. Ba'amar Rabbah tarvayu tanini, they can both be proven from Mishnayot. How do we see that? Alibo, the murder case, ditanan, as it says in the Mishnah, and here comes the Mishnah, where the Dalet is our proof letter. It says, as it says in a Mishnah, if you push somebody into fire or water and they can't escape, you're chayav. Again, that is the reisha of the Mishnah, the part we're not so concerned about. Then, here's the important part. If you push them in fire or water, they could have escaped, yet they die. They let themselves die. Patur, you are not a murderer, you don't have to pay. So you're patur here when the victim lets themselves die. So too, Rabbah is correct that if the Gachala case, you also would be patur. Big dough, what about the damages case? How do we know Rabbah's right there? Just not as it says in a Mishnah. Karak suti, break my jar. Shiber kadi, rip my clothing, break my jar. Chayav, you're chayav. And that's the important part. That's where the reisha ends, and that's where we prove that Rabbah is correct. Then, however, the Gemara will always quote an entire Mishnah. Alman not liftor, if it's related at least, alman not liftor, but if it was on the condition that you would be patur and you broke it, and he said, break it and you won't have to pay, only then patur. But at the end of the day, if you're given permission to break something and you do so, chayav, you are chayav to pay. Just like here, if you put coal on someone's clothing, the victim says, yeah, go ahead, let it burn, I give it permission, still you have to pay because you did the act of damage. In terms of analogy, so this is a perfect example of analogy. An analogy is a situation where you have situation number one and you know what the halacha is. Okay, that's situation number one. I apologize for not drawing out completely. Then you have situation number two, which is similar to situation number one. They are similar. Okay, since the two cases are similar and you know what the ruling is in one case, you could say, so too I know what the ruling would be the same in scenario number two. This is exactly what's going on in our Gemara. Scenario number one, really the first one is the Mishnah, these two Mishnayot. Each Mishnah, right? You can break my jar, rip my clothing, that's one. Or you push somebody into fire or water and they could escape. And we know that the ruling is in that case. That gives us the right to say the same way we know what the ruling is in these cases. We're going to apply that same ruling to Rabbah's case, and we made an analogy between Rabbah's case and the cases of the Mishnayot, and therefore, since the halacha is so in the case of the Mishnah that you're patur for murder, chayav for damages, so too in Rabbah's case, he's correct that the ruling would be that you'd be patur for murder and chayav when it comes to damages. Now let's read it through quickly for the top one more time. Rabbah said, if you put a coal on someone's heart and they die, patur, you are patur from murder, from the death penalty. If you put it on your clothing and it burns, chayav, you are obligated, you put it on their clothing and the clothing burned, they let it burn, chayav, you have to pay. Rabbah says tarvayu tanini. Both of these can be proven from Mishnayot. Al libo ditanan, the on your heart case, the murder case, that Rabbah is correct. Ditanan, as it says in a Mishnah. Kabash alav l'tocha or l'tocha mayim. If you trap somebody under fire or under water, ve'enu yachal misham v'ameit, and they could not escape v'ameit and they die. Chayav, you are chayav because they couldn't escape. However, dachfu l'tocha or l'tocha mayim, you push them into fire or water. misham, and they could escape v'amed and they die, meaning they let themselves die. Patur, you are exempt from murder, so too in Rabba's case he'd be correct. Big ditto. How do we know that Rav is right about the damages case? Ditzanan, as it says in the Mishnah, Karak Suti, if someone says rip my clothing, Shaver Kadi, if someone says break my jar, Chayab, you have to pay for that damage even though they let you. But not liftor, but if it's on the condition that you be patur, then patur. But the bottom line is, since in the first case you're chayav, even though they let you, so too Rav is correct that in the al-bigdo case and it burns, you're also chayav to pay. Okay, now let's take a deep breath. That was my deep breath, and now we're going to go on to the next unit, Unit 5. Unit 5 begins at the top of Chavav Amid Bet, where it says Amar Rabba, right over there. And it goes down to right here, Achi Kabein L'Shachta, that is unit number 5. Let's go. So as we pointed out on this daf, we have a similar pattern in the next 3 or 4 sugyot. We have a situation that's in yellow. We have 5 different areas of halacha, and we're going to discuss in this situation what happens in each of these 5 areas of halacha. And this pattern is similar to our previous Gemara, where you had one scenario, right? You put a coal on someone. In this case, it's a little bit different because one, it's where it's their clothing, and one, it's where it's on their actual body. But either way, it's a situation where you put a coal on somebody and they let it sit there, right? And we talked about there's 2 different areas of halacha. We had murder, and in one case the halacha it was patur. When it came to damages, the halacha was different. So we had a paradigm. What happens if the victim could escape? And when it comes to murder, the halacha is one thing. When it comes to damages, the halacha is something else. So our Gemara does that. Each sugya on this daf does that 5 times instead, not twice, but actually 5 times. Okay, you'll see our Gemara. We have again. This is zoomed into our specific sugya. We have Haita Umunech. Here in yellow is the case. And what happens in these 5 different areas of halacha? The word inyan each time showing you that this is a new area of halacha. I'm going to ask you guys to do this on the test. Where's the scenario? Where are the 5 different areas of halacha? What's the underline the ruling in each? Okay, the braita. You're going to have to be able to locate the parts. So please pay attention. Use the highlights in this video to help you. Okay, and again, speaking of highlights, in purple here is the ruling for each of these halacha. So again, scenario, area of halacha in blue, and then the ruling for each one, depending on what the rules are for each of those areas of halacha. Now let's actually quickly read through this first area of halacha. Just to point out one more thing, let's read the case first. Amar Rabba says, Haita Evan Munach lo v'chaykov. Someone had a rock placed in their lap, v'lo hikir ba, they didn't recognize, they didn't know it was there, v'amad v'naflan, they got up and the rock rolls off. As we pointed out, the important thing here is v'lo hikir ba, which means they had no clue that it was there. And this is all just a paradigm for ones. Okay, it's a paradigm for ones. Ones meaning when something is completely out of your control, there's nothing you could have done about it. Again, this Gemara is not about what happens if there's a rock in your lap and you don't know it's there. It's what happens if there's an ones. This is a paradigm. The rock case is a paradigm for all other ones cases, meaning whatever the law is going to be when it comes to this rock on the lap case, the halacha is also going to be in regards to many other areas of halal, many other situations that are also ones. It serves as a paradigm for ones. So again, we're asking what happens in a case, what happens in all of these different areas of halacha, nizakin, arba devarim, shabbat, galud, and eved, if you act in a way of ones, where it's not in your control. So here we go, let's read it. So what happens? Inyan nizakin, regarding damages, chayab, you have to pay. And we discussed the reason for that. We'll discuss it in a second. Linear arba devarim, for the other 4 things that you pay for if you do damages. Again, if you injure somebody, pain, loss of work, missing work, medical bills, and embarrassment, then you're patur. You don't have to pay if you injured a person ba'ones in a way that wasn't in your control. Linyan Shabbat, regarding Shabbos. Let's say you violated Shabbat, but it was ones, it was out of your control. Melechet machshevet asra Torah. Doing malacha in a normal way is what the Torah prohibited, right? And this is not melechet machshevet, right? The Gemara doesn't say that. You have to read between the lines. This is not melechet machshevet. This is not the normal way people do malacha. Therefore, it's not asra Torah. It's not against the Torah. Therefore, you'd be patur from a korban. Linyan galut, regarding exile. Do you have to go to exile if you killed somebody by accident, but it was ba'onis, it was completely out of your control? Nope. Patur, you don't go to your miklat. Linyan eved, regarding eved. What if you injured your servant, but it was ba'onis, it was out of your control? Do you have to let them go free or not? The Gemara says, Pilukta, it's a machloket between Rabban Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanan. Now, what is the reason for each one of these rulings? Why you chayav for damages if it was out of your control? Tafkina Rashi says, when it comes to damage, we treat accident, like it was on purpose, and ones, like it was like something that wasn't your will, like it wasn't in your control, kiratson, as if it was in your control. Again, the rule is adam muad lo olam. When it comes to damages, even if it was completely out of your control, you always pay for the damage that you do. When it comes to the arba'at divarim, which is not on this list, you're patur because you only pay for the arba'at divarim, the 4 things that you pay for if you injure somebody, if you did it on purpose, or if it was negligent, it was you were careless. In this case, you weren't careless because you had no clue. Regarding Melechet Shabbat, Melechet Machshevet Asra Torah, Shenis Kavin Laso Malacha, El Savar Shayom Chol, Savar Shemalacha Zemuteret. If you do malacha in a normal way, you wanted to do malacha, you just thought it was Shabbat, or you thought that it was allowed, but the act that you did was intended. As opposed to in our case, you had no intention at all of doing what you were doing. You didn't even know that you could. Therefore, you're patur. Le'inyan Galu. I'm sorry, I'm rushing, guys. I'm just trying to get through this whole thing. You can ask me questions in class or email me if you have any problems. Le'inyan Galut regarding exile. Right, so why are you patur? Where there was a mistake. It's only a mistake that you go to your miklat. You knew something. Here you had no idea. If you had a rock and you forgot, you made a mistake, then you go to your miklat. There was no mistake here. You just had no clue it was there. Regarding Evet, right, we'll talk about that when we get to the Gemara. Or I should say when we get to the Breita in the Gemara. So now what's highlighted in yellow here are the cases that we're done discussing, right? We had the case of linyan damages, arba dvarim, Shabbat, and galut. There's nothing else to discuss. Rabbah gave us the ruling, and that's it. However, when it comes to Eved, the Gemara discusses a proof. Linyan Eved, regarding Eved, piluk, it's a machloket between Rabban Shimon and Gamliel the Rabbanan. So it's a machloket. Ditanya, as it says in a Breita. So here Rabbah goes further and gives us proof for how does he know it's a machloket. How do you know that in the case of ones, if you injure your Eved ba'ones, it would be an argument between Rabban Shimon and the Rabbanan whether you let him go free. How do I know that? Ditanya, as it says in a Breita, Harei shaya rabo rofei. If the Eved's master was a doctor and he Amar Lo, and he says to his master, Kachol einai, please treat my eye, b'sima, but yet he blinds him. Or he says, Chatur li shinai, drill my teeth, v'hi but he knocks it out. What do the Rabbanan say? Shichek ba'adon, you laugh at your master v'yatzal and go free. So we see the Rabbanan from here say that if you injure your Eved, even if it's by accident, he gets to go free. Rashba Gomer, Rabban Shimon Gamliel says, Vishichta. The Torah says, Vishichta, and you did damage, and we'll see what that means in a second. When it talks about letting a servant go free, it adds an extra word. What does Rabbi Shimon Gamliel learn from here? You don't let him go free unless you had the kavanah, intent to let him go free. So we see here that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that if you don't have intent to injure your servant and you injure him, he doesn't go free. The Rabbanan say you do, because this is a situation where there was no intent, yet you let him go free. So the same way in this Breita, we see there's a machloket. Do you let your Eved go free if you didn't intend to injure him? There would also be a machloket in our case. Linyan Eved pilut Rabban Rabbanan. If you acted ba'ones, if you injured him, it was out of your control, there would also be a machloket, because when it's not in your control, it also is not in your intention. So again, just to review it, if you look at the pasuk that tells you have to let your Eved go free if you injure them, it says, if someone will strike their servant's eye and damages it, he has to send the servant free because of the eye. So the key here is the fact that it says, and damages it. Obviously you're damaging it. Why else would you have to let him go free? Just because you hit the guy? No, obviously because you damage it. So this seems to be an extra word. So because this extra word, Rabban Shimon Gamliel says this extra word teaches us it has to be intent to damage. What about the Rabbanan? How do they explain the word? It's a good question. So again, the word says v'shachta in the Torah. Rabban Shimon Gamliel says this word, right, v'shachta means to damage it. So Rabban Shimon Gamliel says you have to intend to damage that. You have to intend to damage to let the guy in order to let him go free. What about the Rabbanan? How do they explain the word b'shechta? So we actually did not see it in class, but the Rabbanan, if you look at this Breita elsewhere, if you use the Masorah Shas to see where else this Breita is quoted, there the Breita explains what the Rabbanan do with this extra word. They don't say it teaches you that there has to be intent, because as you know, they don't require intent to let him go free. But it's something else. We'll get to that in class after the test. So just finally reading it through one more time. So in orange here we have highlighted a paradigm for ones. What's the paradigm for ones? If someone had a rock on their lap, they didn't know it was there, they got up and it fell. What happens? Linyani is a kid regarding damages. What if you damage ba'ones? Chayav, you still have to pay for damages. Linyan arba devarim. What if you injure a person? Do you have to pay for those four things? No, patur. You would not have to pay for those other four things if you hurt somebody ba'ones, whether it was out of your control. Linyan Shabbat regarding Shabbat. What if you did malacha on Shabbat, but it was ba'ones, it was out of your control, right? I flipped on a light switch, but it was in a room where there's never a light bulb, and someone put the light bulb in, and I had no way of knowing, right? Or the refrigerator, right? The refrigerator, when you open up the refrigerator, the light goes on. But we never have a light bulb in there for that reason. And someone puts on a light bulb before Shabbat, but I had no idea, so I open up the fridge. What happens? Linyan Shabbat, if you violated Shabbat, but it was out of your control, Malechet Machshevet Asrat Torah. Don't worry. The Torah only, Asrat Torah, the Torah only prohibits Malechet Machshevet, doing Malacha in a normal way. This is not doing it in a normal way, so you would be Patur. Linyan Galut, what about going to exile if I kill somebody ba'ones? No, Patur, you won't have to go because it's not real shogeg. Linyan Eved, what about Eved? What if I injure my Eved but it was ba'ones? Pilot to the Rashbag Rabbanan. It's machloki between Rabban Shimon Gamliel and the Rabbanan. Rabban Shimon Gamliel would say not go free. Rabbanan would say you could let him go free. How do I know it? The Tanyas, it says in a Braita, this purple is the Braita which proves this to be correct. If your master, right, Hayashar Rab Rofei, if his master was a doctor, Va'amarlo, and he says to him, Cholenai, treat my eye, but Simam, he blinds by accident. Chator lo shinai, he says, drill my tooth, Vipilab, he knocks it out by accident. What's the halacha? Shechek ba'adom yatzal cheru. Nevertheless, even though it was by accident, you still let him go free. That's the opinion of the Rabbanan. Rashbag Omer, Rabban Shimon Gamliel says, Sheshechta. No, the pasuk says, and he damages it. What does this teach us?